Thank you.
Which one? Do you want me to change?
My surname is a single P.
Oh, it's
Okay, we're
How's it
live.
pronounced?
Good.
That's pronounced?
No.
No. English people.
Hello everyone, good morning. I hope everyone had a good night last night. We have a full schedule ahead of us today. First we're going to have Robert Helmy of Atlantic Language talking to us about pedagogy in the teaching of the English language. And we will have that for about 45 minutes. Then we will have a short break, and we will then start the second part of the day, which is more of workshop. And we will start with trying to assess where are our institutions in the post-pandemic situation, in the English language teaching in general. And in the afternoon, we'll have a critical look at ourselves as teachers, where we are in the current state of things. The purpose of this exercise is to ask questions of yourselves, so that in the future we can offer this kind of questioning to the teachers who would be interested in using what we produce. So very workshopy day today. Make sure that you think critically about what you're doing, because we will divide ourselves into 3 groups, and tomorrow the 3 groups will present what they have thought of throughout the day today. So without much more ado, I give the floor to Robert. Robert will do, I'm sure, the best introduction of himself and Atlantic language. So enjoy the day. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I should practice my slide in a minute here. I hope it looks elegant. Okay, so morning everyone. Just to start, I'll take off the mask if that's okay. I think it'll be easier to follow what I'm saying. And I sound a little bit sniffly would be the word. So I had a little bit of a cold. I was a little bit paranoid last week before traveling, so I got 2 COVID tests, even though I'm vaccinated. But just a cold. So thank you for the flexibility. Justine McLean allowing me to speak today instead of yesterday, when I'm a little bit more recovered. Just in terms of some housekeeping for the presentation, it's going to be a little bit interactive with some sections where I want your input. I do want to provoke some discussion, and just to get us thinking about some of the challenges in life will create for us as a team. So I'm hoping to start that with this presentation with some of these interactive sections. I would ask if you can all be on the Wi-Fi, possibly even on your phones, because at 1 or 2 points I will ask you to jump to a link or maybe scan a QR code if you know how to do that for some of my interactions. I hope the speed cooperates of the internet and everything like that. If not, I'll try to think of something to amuse you while I panic and catch everything up. Okay, so we'll get into it. And yeah, I'm going to have to do this very inelegant back and forth. Okay, so what I'd like to do is just start by telling a little story. And I know that when somebody starts a talk or a presentation with a story of something that happened on your way here, it usually indicates they prepared at the last minute. And they were on the plane thinking, what will I talk about in my presentation? So on that note, here's my story of something that happened to me on the way here. The day before yesterday. This is my first time in Belgrade, my first time in Serbia. And when I travel, I like to walk and explore and just orientate myself quite a bit. So I got the bus in from the airport and kind of got off the bus as soon as it looked like the city. I didn't read the wonderful document the International School for Vitals. Of course I did not read that. So as soon as it felt like the city centre, I got off the bus and kind of discovered I was way outside the centre and miles from the hotel, and also underestimated the size of Belgrade. I think I thought I was in Galway, where you can...
You know, Petra was sitting next to you.
I was sitting next to you.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, you were on the
No,
bus.
but I was sort of like, it possibly somebody who
Okay.
it might be even Robert,
You could
because I
have
saw
stopped.
him on the call, and I was like, but then I was not sure myself, and I
Yeah.
stood up, and I asked the flight attendant, and she was like, no, and we were gone by the time, and so I went and sat back, but you were all...
And I probably seemed so confident I knew where I was going. that
Exactly,
were
I followed
confused
you
of
almost,
course, yeah.
genuinely, but then she
I was very confident, and I had no idea. But in any case, it was nice because I wanted to walk and get some fresh air, and I was conscious of my cold on the bus, and I wanted to get away from the crowd a little bit. So I started walking, and I said, okay, I've no idea where I'm going. So I get the location of the hotel, the travel lodge we're all staying in. I get the location, and I navigate there using the little dot. And I don't need my mobile data, because I got a message from Vodafone, it's going to cost me €6 every day for using the mobile data. So no, I don't need the mobile data, just the location. So I tried to navigate to the hotel that way. And that's the little blue thing is me, and the point is the hotel. And I can see I'm gradually getting closer. And I knew the original journey was like 45 minutes walk. 1 hour and 15 minutes later, I'm still walking, and I'm still the same distance from the hotel. I begin thinking, I'm not very good at navigation, it's not a skill I have. And I wasn't enjoying the walk then, because I was distracted, and I was I kept having to, stand in my phone to which way am I facing. I don't know if this is a general thing that's true in Belgrade or not, but the drivers are all crazy. As well. Has anyone else noticed that?
You haven't visited Greece, right?
Not yet. No, that's a future pleasure waiting.
We think that they are extra careful drivers.
So they do one thing I've noticed, which is at a pedestrian crossing, even at the green light, they speed up right close to it, and they stop on the brakes very dramatically and in an
They
exciting
just
way.
stop at you.
They test
In my case,
They actually
just...
stopped.
Sometimes they seem to stop. I don't know if they stop every time. But you're crossing and you don't know if this person coming is going to stop or not. So there were about 6 times when I'm trying to navigate on the phone and I almost get run over. So the walk wasn't what I anticipated. So eventually I decided, okay, I have to do this properly, and I turn on the mobile data. I said, okay, €6. I'll pay the €6. Atlantic will pay the €6 for me. And I turn on the mobile data, and I put in my headset, and I have the wonderful voice of the Google Maps going, turn left, turn right, go straight on, and I was able to relax a little bit. You can see the pictures, the difference between the two pictures. One is with my terrible sense of direction, trying to get closer to a dot, and the other was giving me specific directions. And the difference between the two changed my experience of the way I was walking there quite a lot. Because what I realized was that by doing it this way, I was using half of the technology and the resources available to me. I wasn't using it properly. I was in this kind of compromise where I was using the phone a little bit. It's not like I had a compass and an explorer's hat and I was doing it the old-fashioned way. No, I'm still using the phone, but just not using it properly. Whereas I turned on the mobile data, the process became much more easy. And this is maybe a long, convoluted analogy, but there is a point, which I'm going to make a little bit clearer now. Okay. Now this may or may not play. I suppose the irony of when I started using the technology properly, the irony was that the technology became more invisible. I was able to put the phone in my pocket, and I was able to just streamline it and have one little earpiece and the other earpiece to explore, my other ear free to listen to the sounds of Belgrade, and stop thinking and stop looking at my phone. And I was able to actually sample my surroundings a little bit. And the irony of, by using the technology properly, it was less in the way, it was less of an intrusion. And I even got to see these people. So if the video plays, you'll see some of my experience with this. Apologies for the quality of the video. I wasn't planning on using this in the presentation. The idea came later. Was anybody in this park on Sunday?
Yeah.
You saw it? Oh, good. Okay. I waited ages for them to start singing because they just kept playing the drums for like 15 minutes. And I was like, this is going to be amazing. I'm waiting. But I kept walking, and as I was walking down the street, then I heard the singing. But it was nice, and there were loads of families, and the kids were on trampolines, almost in rhythm with the music, and it was just a nice experience. And maybe if I'd been on the phone, like trying to be Marco Polo on my phone, I probably wouldn't have enjoyed the experience quite so much. There was another factor as well. I don't know if you noticed in the screenshot before, my battery was getting exceedingly low, and it was getting to a nervous time. Will I find the hotel before my phone battery dies? And I just about did. I think it was at 9% or something like that. But that gave me an intrinsic motivation to reach my destination. And I think the intrinsic motivation is the key. You know, you should use the phone properly, you should use navigation properly. Our principles, but you must get to the hotel before your phone battery dies. That was a proper motivation for me to learn and to achieve my objective. And I think that principle applies. If we're going to use a digital resource, to use it properly, to exploit motivation when motivation is there, especially if the motivation is intrinsic, and get to where you're going when you have to, in the time you have available. And I think that goes for learning and teaching as well, even if that's classroom guided learning outside of the classroom, or independent learning. I think the same principle applies. Okay, so I don't know if this is legible or not. He thinks he's so cool since he got this new tablet. My point being that new technology is maybe a relative term. I'll come back to that, but from this story, I asked myself, like, this was an example of technology being used ineffectively, okay? Not using the resources available to me in an effective way. And I wanted to ask I asked myself, why? Why was this an example? Why was I using the technology ineffectively? Because I'm not a technophobe. I was happy to use the phone, so the desire to use the resource was not a problem. But there were barriers or obstacles to a successful implementation of the technology. There were some barriers. And the barriers are the following. One of them was resistance. Resistance by the end user. That end user, I use the term end user, it could be teacher, it could be learner. The resistance, and in this case the resistance was a stubborn tourist who thinks they're Marco Polo and will not do things in an intelligent way. But the resistance was there. Secondly, a poorly focused or poor concentration with the end user, not quite following the subject matter. So in this case, somebody with a cold who's worried about losing their battery and is not very good at walking and thinking at the same time. So that was another barrier. The third barrier was a limited budget. And the limited budget applied in this case. I didn't want to spend €6 on the mobile data. Okay, and the fourth barrier of 5 was limited time. I had to get to the hotel before the battery was gone in my phone. And a fifth barrier is a low level of confidence, okay, in the end user. Again, not knowing knowing the basics of how to use a map, but maybe not knowing it well and walking into traffic when trying to concentrate. So these 5 barriers, like resistance, maybe poor focus or motivation, limited budget, limited time, and lower competencies. Barriers to implementation of successful technology in my example. And my point is that the difference between technology and not technology is completely arbitrary. Okay, it's at one point a pencil and paper were technology. Now we associate it with the internet and Bluetooth and virtual reality and new gadgets. But at one point, the stone tablet was technology. So it's not a set line. It's an arbitrary line we draw. I thought I was being retro or not using the technology, but I was still using my phone. The line is an imaginary one between using technology and not using technology. And the question we have to ask is, how can we use the resources available to us effectively? Okay.
I think it quite nicely already summarizes the challenges that teachers have regarding using technology.
my convoluted analogy possibly makes a little bit of sense in that case, no? Good, I'm glad to hear it.
We can write a textbook about this, like 6 most common reasons for not achieving your results while using technology, or any methodology.
And I think I probably found 5 or 6 of them straight away in my own particular case. If we're going to get, actually I'll listen now.
I have heard this limited time excuse so many times.
Limited time, there's not enough,
Not enough time to do stuff properly.
yeah. Limited time, like limited time to learn, limited time to implement it, and limited resource. But resource, like the internet, is not limited. So I would question limited resource if that is a thing as well. I'll come back to this in a moment. What I'd like to do now is a quick interactive game, actually, and a low-tech game. So this is going to be quite simple and old-fashioned, and we're going to use ourselves as a sample group of teachers, and we're going to play a game called Never Have I Ever. Is the text big enough? Can everybody read those? So we're going to do this, I think, in groups of, let me see, here's groups of 4. Okay, so yeah, let's all stand up. And this is like a common party game. Has anyone played this game in a party? Never have I ever.
No.
Okay, it's a good drinking game. All the best teaching games are also drinking games.
Yes.
Robert, you're alive to the world.
Okay, I'm going to stand out of the way a little bit. The point of the game is that we're going to make a statement. And if the statement is something you've never done, you sit down. Okay? So if it's something never, and you start the sentence by saying, never have I ever, and if you've never done it, take a seat. If you have done it, keep standing. If you like, give an example or some context of when you did do it. Okay, so we'll start here, and for me to spare my voice a little bit and have you listen less to me, I'd like to ask you to read the sentences in turn. So just start by saying, never have I ever sent students their homework online.
It's the question before was that VLE?
Yeah.
What's that for?
If you don't know, that kind of will answer the question.
Shall I sit down with you?
Not yet, we're just on this one, just on the orange one. So never have I ever sent students homework online. Nobody sat down, I think, right? One person sat down. He's just checking his email. Okay, so an easy one, I can presume everybody's done that at some stage. Okay, not very surprising. Let's go to the next one. Okay.
Never have I ever allowed phones in class.
Everybody's had a phone in the classroom or something.
Never have I ever asked students to look something up online.
was probably me because I'm teaching 6 years old, so I cannot really continue with that.
I guess I mean you're in the class as well. Okay, so that's
Yeah.
fine. We lose you, Petra. Okay, you're good ambassadorship for N8 Technology Forum. That you're the first person to.
It's hard, like how do you want to make 6 years old look up stuff online if they barely can read and write?
Exactly. Yeah, no, you know, maybe you can come back in. Okay, the next one.
Never have I ever used a digital scoreboard.
By digital scoreboard here, I mean, you know, like one of those interactive things, the equivalent of putting stickers on a chart, but in some way doing it on the internet. So use a digital. Nobody's sitting down. Everybody's.
Scoreboard, you mean like scoreboard?
Like whiteboard or something in our teams.
You know, your points if you're doing a teams,
Okay.
a gamified exercise in
Okay.
class. And if you've done some way, which team is winning, and you've
I
done
don't use scoreboards at all, so
you'll probably lose you with the
yes, yeah, so like virtually or not.
Okay. Okay, I'm surprised. Okay, I'm interested in your perspective that you don't use that. Okay, so we lose a few people here. The next one is the green one.
Have I ever played a YouTube video in class?
No, there's no backseats.
When you
There's no backseats here. Okay, most people have played a YouTube video in class. Okay, the next one, and the next person now is Senator.
Never have I ever played a YouTube video in class.
Okay.
Oh, is that touchscreen? Okay.
Abbiamo già le soluzioni finite.
A game online class.
Okay, so played or held a game online or in class. And I don't mean a game of like something with physical with your hands or a talking game, a game using the internet. We lose a few people here.
We almost did one yesterday.
Can she?
No vaccine, no vaccine.
You are dead. You're dead.
Okay.
It's
Next
the
one.
same with.
We never have had students create multimedia content.
So do we stand up when we? If
No, no,
we-
no vaccines.
You are dead.
You're dead. We can really see Savina's competitive side coming out. Okay, so multimedia content, we don't lose anybody, so a lot of people.
No.
You've never had like students create an audio story or an
Inside the
animation?
PPT, yeah. Inside the PPT, insert the video.
Like what?
Maybe
Like,
they make like a video or some audio.
to make
An animation.
their own
The
videos?
students create their
They're
own
probably
content.
too young
No.
for that.
No content.
Okay, but the rest of you have. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe someone can give an example for some of the people standing up.
Yeah, we created commercials for some brands in my English class. The students were divided into groups of 3 or 4, and they didn't have to act in it, all of them, and they used teachers. Actually, I can show you the video later. I mean, it was super fun. They had a lot of fun. They enjoyed it, and that's it.
I've seen that done before. It's really cool
Yeah.
actually. They love the concept. Okay, the next one we're up to Savina.
Yeah, have you ever used
No.
that?
I don't know.
Just
I don't know.
Does anybody know what it stands for?
Virtual learning environment.
Okay, I'll elaborate a little bit then. Edmodo, Google Classroom. So never have I ever used one of these. You all have, no? So what is international school have their own based on Google Classroom, right? Okay, so
We use other
virtual
VLEs
learning.
then.
I know there are changeable terms, but that's the term I think generally. Okay, the next one I think we're up to.
Interacted with the class on social media, yes.
But do you mean like just social media? So Edmodo wouldn't be that because it's also for communicating
I know
and
Edmodo is a bit of
interacting.
both.
Okay.
I guess I mean here like, have the students followed you on Twitter or Instagram? Or have you liked something they did on TikTok or Snapchat? I'm getting into.
Instagram, yes.
You've all done that? Okay. Okay, there's this whole area.
Do
of-
study trips count when we stalk them?
Do we
They
count the
drink
social
alcohol?
media that they are going to create to contact us?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can count that. Okay, we're up to Martin.
Never have I ever taught online. Do it a lot.
Especially recently, all the time.
Probably we could have had a few people stand up again.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're not quite in order.
And what's the difference, yeah, so students who were online, I mean, you have to be online.
So this is the last one.
We had, taught students who, never have I ever taught students who were online.
So by this I mean maybe you were in the school or you were in the classroom, but your students are remote.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, this is what we have live stream for.
Okay, so we're back around, we have 6 people still standing up, there's one
We're
space
winning.
blank.
Did
So it's back to your turn now again.
Did they usually go there and
I'd like you
talented?
to
Did they
fill
look
this
at it?
square for me with the most difficult thing you can
Oh
think
my
of
gosh.
that will make you win the game and get everybody else to sit down.
Uh-huh.
So the final frontier, if you like.
Okay, let me think. Never have I ever. Never have I ever had a class without using technology.
Wow.
I can't hear, sorry.
Never have I ever had a class without using technology.
Oh my God.
You've gone the other direction.
Yeah.
The three
You're a
winners.
science teacher.
The 3 winners, so congratulations.
The award, please.
The award is I have a bag of international school with a yellow pen and a beautiful mask, and I give it to you guys.
Okay.
Actually, I was supposed to say without. Well,
You could have went the other way with it, yeah, but you won, so it works, you know, it's a means to an end. It's all about winning. So congratulations. Okay. So it's not quite in a ladder, but I wanted to get a sense of the kind of an algorithm of progress, if you like. And also to keep in mind, we're not a typical group. We're in an Erasmus project which is focused on technology in learning. So we're absolutely not representative of the broader focus of teachers. But imagine maybe playing this game with your colleagues back at a coffee break back in your schools. Maybe a lot more people would be sitting down a lot more quickly. And this is the idea I want you to think about a little bit. I'm going to go back a little bit and just give a little bit of context to Inglife and the origins of the project. And if you'll allow me to talk about myself for a couple of minutes, but not too long, even though it is my favourite topic. And I suppose, like, my own perspective as maybe the Trotsky of the Inglife initiative. Maybe that's not a good analogy, because then just Lenin. So maybe not. But the idea of the project and how it came together, and just to give you a little bit of my own background as well. Like in a previous life, my formative teaching experience was starting out in classrooms where there were very few materials, and it was a very agile, dynamic style of teaching, where you're on your feet and thinking all the time. And I actually shied away completely from technology. I didn't use it at all. But I did always look to create engagement and to use gamification and games as a way to create engagement. But didn't go near technology at all, so was quite a late convert. I think I didn't even have a smartphone until I was like 23, so I was quite a late convert to that. And it's something I tend to be now kind of the ambassador of technology in my own institution, or be seen as very enthusiastic for it, but that's definitely not always been the case, and it's not a natural situation. And I think sometimes people who are not so interested in using technology can create an imaginary barrier. Oh, you're a techie. And that's not necessarily the case. And I was quite a late convert, and technology became a way for me to engage my students a little bit later. But what I was primarily interested in was acquisition of vocabulary and organising games and ways to use vocabulary around that as well. So I ended up going from teaching into an enterprise, and I've included some images of some things we did there. And this is going back about 10 years ago, where I had a partner, or a co-founder, who was much more attuned to technology than I was, and I was the teacher of the enterprise. And I brought the games and the ideas, put them through a digital kind of wash to try to make a startup and to get into the whole educational technology area. We had some examples there of using games to learn vocabulary. You can see the concepts, like a dictionary with which saved vocabulary and tested you on it later. A little bit like Linguist, which Mark talked about yesterday. It exploited spaced repetition to come back and remind you of the vocabulary, and also personalized the vocabulary that people were interested in learning. Because we saw, looking at a dictionary to find a word you didn't know, later on that word was interesting to you, so it should be something you revise later on. So we applied similar principles as Linguist, as Mark talked about yesterday. And we created some grammar narrative games and stuff like that around that as well. So it was an interesting experience and an educational one as well. We started off with like a Duolingo kind of model. How can people learn language this way? Almost like we were trying to replace the teacher and reach independent learners, because we were thinking like, we're going to make the next killer app and be billionaires, because everyone who makes an app becomes a billionaire. And this is the way we were thinking. And but then we kind of, quite late in the enterprise, realized that our audience was actually teachers. I think Duolingo, as I mentioned as an analogy, have also realized that in the last year or two. The audience is actually teachers, and the customer is actually schools. Because if you can convince the teacher that this is an addition to the classroom, that's obviously a good way to propagate your resource and a good business opportunity if you can do that. And of course, teachers are the best and most critical audience, because they will only incorporate something if they see it as solving a problem or creating something new, or creating new opportunities in the classroom. We realized that quite late, and changed towards that. And for all we learned about doing things well and making those games in a commercial way, we forgot to make any money. So that we went back to the real world and went back to work. But the experience itself was quite an educational one. And what I took away from it was a preoccupation, an obsession almost with engagement and teaching. But I had changed my perspective. Engagement, for me, technology now became a very relatable way to get this engagement from students. As we saw one of the images yesterday of, was it 6 kids on their phones? The digital natives, and this has happened even more in the decade since I was doing this. Even more, the digital natives now, the technology is the way into their mind, the way to engage them in the lesson. And that's like, engagement is king, and that's the principle I've applied to teaching since. And that's when then we developed the idea for InLife in a passing conversation at Atlantic a few years ago. And a few factors came together then. I was trying to find a way to put this way, how can technology be exploited as something for engagement? And there's something to do here. There's some research that could be good here. There's an interesting project in it. But it was just an idea, and possibly a poorly executed, maybe, idea for a project that didn't have any success. So it needed a couple of other factors. And one was Atlantic back in Galway, and the atmosphere of promoting research and development, especially through Erasmus. I think we mentioned yesterday we're in 3 different projects, TillMed with Justina Michelina, and Boost being 2 others. Boost is quite a similar one, where it's about digital resources for teachers as well. So having this fertile atmosphere and the opportunity in my job to spend time on it was ingredient number 1. And then ingredient number 2 was finding people and refining the idea and building a network with people who knew how to do it. Lumina Foundation, Justina Michelina, that was the second part, because that turned an idea, a little bit pie in the sky, like maybe a slightly vague or abstract idea, into a reality, and the reason the project came to light, and the reason we're here today then as well. So those 2 things came together, and it's very exciting then to have an opportunity to actually do this research, something I've been thinking about for years that is becoming reality. It's quite an exciting opportunity, and I'm really interested to see what we learn while we're doing it, and how we use what we learn. Okay, so going back then to what I was talking about before and the game we played, I tried to come up with a categorization of stages or states of of a teacher's readiness to use digital and technological resources. I don't want to say 5 types of teacher, because they're not static. People will go from one to the other. My own journey, I've probably had all of them. I probably ended up maybe around here. So I tried to come up with a potential spectrum or a potential range of states or stages in which a teacher will find themselves in how they use digital resources, how they use technology. So I'll just elaborate a little bit on each one. Okay, and I suppose, sorry, I just want to expand on one point, how they use technology successfully. Not like me with the mobile data turned off on the phone, doing it half, but doing it successfully and successfully improving the experience of their students in the classroom. Okay, so an early draft, but these would be my my examples. Evasive, I think people who will avoid the digital resource, avoid the technology in the classroom at any cost. My example is a teacher I suppose caught once taking an interactive whiteboard, with the touch screen, and using the old board marker, like a permanent marker, or not a permanent marker, but a whiteboard marker, and completely destroying the interactive whiteboard. And then I found that they knew they were doing it on purpose, because they didn't want to use the touch screen, they didn't want to use the technology. This is just a piece of paper and they were writing on it. So it was a classic example of someone who was just completely evading the technology to use something they were comfortable with. Reluctant, they can be persuaded, but will probably never do it. Will compete as long as someone is in this state or in this stage. Will probably not embrace what's there and will do it quite reluctantly. And I have an example of a teacher I worked with and did quite a lot of training with to work online, to do online classes. But the person, I couldn't persuade them to keep with it. They eventually just abandoned it and went and taught in a different way somewhere else. They had to get back to the classroom. The person was willing to spend a certain amount of time training with me, but just became frustrated very quickly. And they had convinced themselves that they weren't able. And once they had done that, I wasn't able. I wasn't a good enough trainer to persuade this person to change their opinion. Coachable, I would say, is will make plenty of mistakes. Someone who is trying it out and valiantly, bravely giving it a go, but will stumble sometimes. I had a recent example of a teacher who was teaching a hybrid lesson with multiple computers in the room, and she called me in a panic. There was a problem with the mouse on the screen, because there are like 2 screens, and it's quite a complicated setup for hybrid teaching. A little bit like this with extra parts. And she called me in a panic because the mouse wasn't working and she couldn't move to the next page of the coursebook. When I got into the room, it took me a moment, and I realized she was moving the mouse of her laptop. It wasn't the mouse, it was an entirely different mouse. And her head had just become fried, because there was so much technology going on, and was completely enthusiastic and willing, but just, you have that brain scramble, and you're pressing the wrong thing completely. But I completely understood as well, because there were 15 students looking, and the pressure is there, and that panic just produces.
This is my description.
Never have I ever done that. Okay, and an experimenter, I would say, is maybe a little bit further along, will probably show some more innovation and enterprise, maybe, use their own initiative as well, to use another word that sounds similar. And an example of this I recall is doing an observation of a teacher who was doing a crossword. It was a quite advanced class of young students, so I had a crossword pulled from one of the newspapers and was going through the crossword. And, a nice activity. It's a bit time consuming maybe, but it's a good way to talk about vocabulary and the clues of plenty of grammar. But the way he was doing the crossword was that he had drawn it on a Microsoft Word document and shaded it with using paintbrush. Had actually drawn out the crossword, so copied it from the newspaper into Paint, and spent about an hour and a half drawing it, and then put it on the screen using the projector. So use the resources, use the technology, but in a completely crazy way that took him forever to create. But his idea was there, And he was doing an experiment. And because it was an observation, I think he wanted to show me that he was trying out new things. But when I said, you could have just got the crossword online and projected it. You didn't have to draw the crossword. Oh, okay, the next time I'll do that. But the idea was there, the enterprise was there, and the initiative. And the last one then, the pioneer. And I'm grateful that, I mentioned this yesterday, that some of our teachers had surprised me in how quickly they adapted and got on top of the new technology when they had the challenge of teaching online. To the point where within a few months of teaching online, our teachers were doing training sessions for other schools. And there was a teacher who did a demo of an app called WordWall, which is like a gamification tool for the classroom, and showed it to, there was an audience of about 80 teachers from different schools. And this teacher didn't know what WordWall was 6 months previously. If I had said to them, you'll be doing training on an educational technology device in 6 months, they would not have believed me. And I think that's someone who's a pioneer who then advocates it to others. Okay, so a quick task now, and we'll do this as a group. Sorry about all the text. Is it legible? Mm-hmm. Okay, what I'd like to do here is just a little task where there are 10 descriptors. I'd like you to organize them into the 5 stages of the spectrum I've come up with. So let's discuss it in pairs for a moment, and then as a group, we'll decide which descriptor goes with which level or which state on the spectrum. So have a think about it with a partner for a moment, and then we'll come back and decide and see if we get consensus as a group. Okay, so take 2 minutes with a partner.
So how about number 1?
They use technology, but
So without taking using every source, like I get planning to is the example of
They're willing, but then take
use the digital tool.
which I think is crazy, they won't do it, they do it. Yes, they just still coach it.
Showing that
Pioneer.
yeah, what's the next stage?
So we just use
After a second we become
Somebody who does an experiment, somebody else, as that's the way I see it.
because
No, each, so each company.
Yeah, because when I read it again, that seems like
They won't be using the way you use it.
Do you think everybody's experimenters more?
and then you stick to
Reading
continued using the
yeah, it's
because she tried something. when they were forced to use more technology, this is so depends, I guess. Because as I'm overused, I overlook myself.
For experimenters.
30 seconds.
They don't experiment with anything. So I'm not really sure.
They all know that I'm trying to experiment.
Yeah.
Trick question is associated with
Because you say you use
For communication and for the platform.
Okay, have you had enough time?
yes.
F
So
and
maybe in
G
the
are
future
very easy.
we'll switch from
Yes.
to just teams.
Yeah, obviously, that's
G is
That is motivated for me, you know,
See, there are middle stages.
Yeah.
and like
Because I'm always into my
Alright, we're done.
I asked them whether they wanted to
somehow there must be a way to sort of put this together.
You should just take a note of these. Maybe you don't agree with
Yes, and put them into
Yeah.
so that they don't have to go to
Yeah, I'm sure you can combine those.
There was some like more notebooks here.
me. Okay, so let's go through the statements one by one and see if we have consensus on which descriptor it applies to, or which state it applies to. So A, learns a new tool with trial and error. Okay, learns a new tool with trial and error. Which one do you think?
experiment.
just speaks for itself, experimenting.
Yeah, experimenter, everyone agrees? Yeah. Okay. Okay, B, is the go-to person to ask about apps or programming, or apps or programs, sorry, any kind of digital resource really, among their colleagues, the person that people ask. Which one do you think that is?
Pioneer.
Pioneer? Yeah, that's what I thought as well. The next one, we'll find a paper-based way to do most things. Which one do you think that is describing?
Or a very tired pioneer. Straight.
Gets panicked or frustrated with technical hiccups?
Which one it is? Reluctant. D, right? D. Reluctant.
How about coachable?
I hear that as reluctant, but I can see. Maybe
It
coach
reminded us of your example with a mouse.
with the mouse.
Yeah,
This one was.
Yeah, and that person is definitely coachable, the person I'm talking about. Yes, I'm yeah, potentially. Yeah. So yeah, it's maybe it's a little bit coachable, a little bit reluctant. My other example, maybe it's between the two. We'll often reuse or lift a colleague's routine by way of using a digital resource. So like they won't adapt it, they'll just copy exactly what they saw, but they'll try the new resource. Which one do you think that's describing?
Coachable.
Coachable?
So they're reluctant to learning new stuff, right? But they're coachable so you can actually teach them new stuff.
Maybe, yeah, maybe they're reluctant, maybe they're a little bit afraid, but the resource itself, and I've seen this example so many times, like I've seen teachers who, they've had a workshop on Padlet, and they'll go somewhere.
Everybody uses Padlet.
But they even use the same Padlet.
Yeah.
They'll not just use Padlet the program, they'll use the same vocabulary or the same, they'll copy the thing exactly. So there's a little bit of fear.
Yeah, we had this at our school. So we have 15 different subjects, and then we discover like a new platform, and then everybody uses it. Maths, physics, geography, history. Yeah. And it doesn't work for everyone.
We're not experimental because we can say that he reuse all the materials colleagues have and then improve them.
That's true.
And so on.
They're willing to
New
try
tools,
it.
new
Yeah, you would like to see them maybe make it their own, but yeah, they are at least they're experimenting with the resource, and maybe later they get the confidence to properly become an experimenter and adapt it. Maybe if they do it without that, they stay at the coachable stage. Okay, there's no definitive answer, so I'm just provoking the conversation really. The next one, who bans phones in the classroom unilaterally? I think we've passed that moment a few years ago, I think, haven't we? Quietly tries out new platforms, and you know that the people I'm talking about, who you'll say, have you tried Mentimeter to do this with your students, to create a poll? It's like, oh, I've been using that for ages, but they never say it. And they've quietly, independently become an expert. Which type do you think that is? They're doing it themselves, so they're not quite becoming a pioneer. They resist using a resource when it's not obligatory or apologetically introduce it. And you know, we're going to use a technical tool now in the class, everybody take out your phones, they're almost negative. And straight away they demotivate the students because they're not into it themselves. Which type do you think that is?
Reluctant.
Yeah, they'll do it if they have to, but they really don't want. And we'll overuse a digital tool they've become comfortable with, so they'll possibly use the same one thing again and again and again.
Maybe virtual.
Yeah, they just need to see more, don't they? They just need to, if they're using Padlet all the time, maybe we can show them Quizlet as well. And the person who gets associated with that type of thing, and they encourage, so the person who, by dint of being good with one resource, will fix the charger in someone's phone who's broken. They just get every kind of technical question. Which type do you think that is? Binary, yes.
It's interesting because you can go forward, but you can go back.
You can, I guess.
Yeah, I found myself very often, like, for example, when we were doing the first season of online teaching, a bunch of colleagues did it independently, but then the school caught up and sort of made us go to one platform and started unifying the experience for the students. And then we became reluctant to move because we've already had developed some habits. Yeah. And it was, as you said, a lot of work to switch. And we were like too busy working to sort of improve the work that we were doing and simplify, etc. So like sort of, I found myself during one weekend when I was like, I just don't want to do it.
Yeah. It becomes this big thing that you're not engaging.
And like I have to copy all my classrooms from whatever I was using, Google Classroom, I think, to Teams, and like copy the content and everything.
I feel this way about TikTok. I have no idea what it is or how to use it, and I'm terrified of it. And I know I should, and it becomes almost a mental block, doesn't it? So just a reminder, like this is a draft of an idea, a draft of a categorization idea, and is that okay? Maybe it's timed up. But I just want to again reiterate my point that I think these are states. They're not types of person. They're not types of teacher. They're states a teacher will go forward in, or as you say, potentially go back in as well, and maybe will change as the situation changes too. Okay. I just want to give a little bit of historical context then, and on methodology. And oh, sorry, that image is terribly resoluted. Yes. It's not legible, is it?
No.
Okay, it's okay.
Well, like
it's
the
not
right method is there.
Happens with history sometimes.
Sorry?
Happens with history sometimes.
With history?
Yes. Also, it's a bit of a test for us English teachers, like we should know this.
It's like a closed text exercise. Yeah, but I like that. History is vague, we're looking back. This is not original anyway. I've sourced this slide. I just wanted to give an overview, but I'm not going to spend too much time
there. There is grammar translation.
But it's just a little bit of an archive or a tree of development, if you like, of English language teaching pedagogy. And what new teachers are probably learning in their courses, and how we got here, and more importantly, when I come to next, is where we go next. One of the ironies, I think, of what's happened for the last couple of years is that some of the older pedagogies, like the audiolingual method, or Rosetta Stone, repeat drills, or the direct translation, these were probably more suited to being done on Zoom and on Teams and being done online. But as we progressed into communicative language teaching, where everybody should be speaking and learning from each other, that's much harder to do online when your students are not allowed to come into the school. And it's one of the ironies of the past couple of years, I think.
Yeah, but the conversation thing is like the oldest form of teaching.
Yeah. So we're going back to the roots. Yeah. And
the ancient times, I guess.
like, I suppose like community language teaching as a family is maybe breaking up then into different areas, and we're getting more specific. Like, and one of the focuses of this project, there's much more peer-based learning and students learning from each other in an intercultural classroom. Registered English as a dialect is not the only type of English to learn anymore. I think Justina alluded to this yesterday. There are different accents and different cultures to learn from. There's an international English, but the awareness of different accents is one, and multicultural exposure to that. And the quick story of that is when I tried teaching younger kids back in my full-time teaching days, I had one particularly hyper child, about 7 years old. It was just very difficult to manage in the classroom. He'd get too excited and jump on the table and everything. So I taught him the expression, take it easy. There was an ad for caramel chocolate that used to be on television in Ireland with a bunny who was very relaxed and would say, take it easy. Cadbury's caramel. So I taught the child, take it easy. And it was a cue for him to take a breath. And a couple of weeks later, and it was working in the classroom, a couple of weeks later his mother came to me after the class and asked me, this was in Spain, so asked me in Spanish, what's this take it easy, this expression that you've taught my son? And I was like, oh, take it easy, it means calm down. And she said he was at a birthday party at the weekend, and all of the kids were running around extremely excited in the game, and he stood up in the middle of the room of all the kids and started to say, take it easy, take it easy. And I heard him saying it later on, and he had a perfect Irish accent when he was saying take it easy. It just came out, and I was like, oh, that's my accent. And it was just, take it easy. And I also want to draw your attention to international English, not just recognizing accents, but learning from non-native teachers as well. And a lot of the focus of the big English language teacher conferences now, so much of the narrative of that is incorporating teachers who are not native English speakers and are equally, if not more important, in the English language teaching industry. And that type of international English becoming more and more important. Okay, one other point I want to make about this is just like to resist the temptation, as you were saying, like to view where we are now in methodology as the end destination. And it's always the temptation to think history ends now, like with me. You know, it's not a culmination. And I would think it's actually quite early. And again, we had this in one of the talks yesterday. I think Mars talked that English language teaching, language learning, is one of the least evolved areas in terms of usage of technology. So we're actually at quite an early stage, and how communicative language teaching and the variance and the niches within communicative language teaching, how they will change when technology evolves a little bit more is completely unknown, I think, and it's just what goes beyond that, I think, is quite interesting. Okay, in this case I just want to give some examples. Very briefly, but you may recognize some of them. Any shout if you recognize any of those digital resources? Yeah?
Yeah, Kahoot, this is Mentimeter, Quizlet, Padlet.
Yeah. So entirely subjective. I'm presenting just a few I've seen and focusing on resources. A lot of them I find have probably two things in common. They're all using gamification in one way or another. They're turning the learning process into a game, or they're adding elements like scoring, or points, or rewards, or maybe like word wall. I think is that one. That one, sorry. That's full-on game. Like they've turned the vocabulary acquisition into a game. Something I tried to do 10 years ago unsuccessfully, and they're doing it quite well. Quizlet, maybe the same thing. You know, a quiz is a form of a game anyway.
Oh, scoreboard. Okay, I use it.
So, okay, so you could have worked out. It's too late. You're dead.
No,
yeah, there's no vaccines.
They have added so many new features since the pandemic
Is
started.
it?
Yeah, not all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can see them catching up and reacting to this tension, which is quite exciting actually. Apart from the gamification, one thing I found a lot of them have in common is they're still quite teacher-centered, and a big part of, I think, the development of peer learning and Multicultural learning, I think, is student-centered, student-first learning, coming from the students themselves, creating resources. But a lot of these, and a lot of the way I still see them being used is quite teacher-centered. The teacher will create the Padlet and share it with the class. The teacher will create the word wall game and share it with the class. So maybe there's room for development in that area as well. But there is development, and I remember doing like research and competitive research on the state of educational technology in language learning, and like a few years ago, a lot of what you saw was just flashcards with the word and the image, and it was a digital way of doing that, which I think is underutilizing digital technology. If you're just creating something you could do offline. I want to give a little bit on our context as well, locally, and just present a case study of a language school teaching adults and teenagers and slowly embracing technology, quite representative, I would say, of English language schools, private English language schools or academies, who would be quite developmental and forward-thinking, but probably not so far ahead of others either. Like, so this is, as of January 2020, this is where we were. We had these practices in terms of what our teachers did, which we're in the process of phasing out. So some of them we had started. For example, we had replaced like the old CD player with the disc from the course book. We had started replacing that with audio from the cloud. We had started allowing phones in where students brought their own device to an extent. Emails that people forget their password, we were starting to move into using something like Teams for chat and starting to use the cloud as well. But then, February 2020, there was a bit of a game changer. So we had to accelerate what we were doing. And changes that had been happening slowly for over a year, maybe 2 years, then all of a sudden all these new things had to happen quite quickly. All of a sudden we weren't using paper, we were on our VLE. Does anyone remember what that stands for? All of a sudden, like, instead of doing a YouTube video in like a special class in the afternoon, teachers were incorporating like TED Talks and YouTube videos into the class. And they were streaming it maybe from YouTube directly or sending the video to students. All of a sudden we were teaching not only online, but asynchronously and blended, and also teaching hybrid as well. And we were no longer using course books, and we were no longer filling in boxes for attendance. So this was a particular innovation. I remember a fantastic teacher who was completely unable, even though had lots of coaching on this, was just found it impossible to properly fill in the box with the pencil when a student was attending the class, and they weren't able to do it. And it was such a silly little thing, but moving the attendance online where they could click a button made things a little more efficient. And the point I want to make is the accelerated modernization, the accelerated change. We were forced to, and were able to digitalize a lot of our procedures quite quickly. I won't talk about this too much. I just wanted to give a quick image of it. Sorry about the image quality. But hybrid teaching was something we were doing as well. I mentioned this yesterday. When you're trying to do communicative language teaching as a hybrid exercise so that students at home, whether they were quarantining or they were sick or they were in their own country, in our case, were able to join the students in the classroom in a communicative class. So not just a camera and a microphone on the teacher, but cameras and microphones on the other students in the classroom as well. A hugely complicated process actually in terms of the setup, and really challenging for teachers to learn about as well. But something that was a challenge that people embraced and actually got to grips with quite quickly. And one quote I remember is a piece of feedback from a teacher found the jump from teaching online to teaching hybrid much smaller than it was to teaching online in the first place. The biggest thing was what happened in March 2020 when it was suddenly do everything you did before, but now on Zoom. This was a much smaller jump. Okay, I'm probably low on time now. Is that okay? Okay. Possibly I'm talking too much as well. Okay, so I'll do one more talky slide, and I think then we do another interactive piece as well. And I wanted to talk here about the changing expectations. And the changing expectations, but keeping in mind before the pandemic and after the pandemic. And they were changing anyway, but what did the pandemic do to student expectations? What do teachers now need to be able to do? And the pandemic would have accelerated this quite a lot. Like we talked yesterday about learning from students, which is an effective way to do things. Petra talked about this really, really well. They know, they're better than us at these tools. But the question I want to ask is, can we catch up? And at what point will the student get tired of explaining to a teacher like me what TikTok is? We probably won't catch up. So there's a degree there, and we have to find how far that can go. And it's the same thing with learner patience. You know, students who are very sharp with technology will indulge a teacher like trying to find the cursor on the screen, or
should they always try to catch up?
I don't know.
We should be a little bit behind to give them a little bit of sort of privacy, intimacy, and space.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah. It's like it's actually good, but we are a little bit behind. You're not invading every space that they occupy.
And it's not realistic to be an expert on
like once teachers get on TikTok, that's it for teenagers. We're gonna this is what's happening. We're gonna move somewhere else.
We'll go like Facebook.
Because as long 3 teachers on TikTok, that's fine. But like all of us, we're gonna move. Probably moving now.
It's quite funny how the baby boomer generation. What was the one after the generation? The one after the baby boomers yesterday. Millennial. No, before Y. And after baby boomers, I can't remember that one, the 1960s. X, is it? Okay, so how they took over Facebook and took it away from kids.
MySpace before.
And then all of a sudden it completely became uncool really quickly and really effectively. Yeah, maybe we will do the same thing to TikTok. Enough structured CPD. In terms of professional development, there's some research to support this, and we have some research as part of this project as well. The training, maybe it's a generalization, is probably not quite there yet in terms of using resources. We still, I think, collectively depend a little bit on the pioneers and the experimenters becoming pioneers to do this. Like, there's no part of the Delta that really goes into detail, or like an online masters in TESOL that explain properly how you can use newer digital resources. And the people who are not pioneers, do they have a safe environment to try stuff out and compare it with what their colleagues are doing and potentially become pioneers? Transferable content. And what people are good at offline, can they do it online? What people are good at in a traditional classroom, can they do in a less traditional classroom? And we think of good examples of this as well. One thing, I just want to put it in there so we don't forget, but once we're online and communicating with our students and potentially even on social media, we do have to think of the implications of that as well, and safety, and not only GDPR and child protection, but everything else that ensues with that as well. And it's something in this project we should make sure we don't overlook. And I think it was alluded to yesterday as well. There's more planning time now for teachers, and when does it get done? There's more correction of homework, but there's more planning to prepare a Padlet or prepare a Quizlet or create a resource. Takes quite a bit of time, and it's something to be conscious of. Okay. This is quite. I think I'll come back to this. Yeah, I'm going to do an interactive bit first. I'll come back to that because that was going to be me talking for the last couple of minutes. So we'll do this interactive and then I'll come back in about 10 minutes more, if it's okay.
No, it's good. You have still 20 minutes.
Oh, great. Okay, so we can give it a bit of time. Okay. Okay, so we have an exercise, and this is one of the things I mentioned. I'd like you to engage with this Padlet and brainstorm some ideas. And I'd like you to make some. This is kind of going the way of making some predictions of what the in-life project will do. And I've set 4 categories. So if you've not used Padlet before, the first thing you need to do is access it. You can scan this with the camera app on your phone, with the QR code, if you know how to do that. You can type this in to your laptop if you prefer. And both of them will get you there. You'll find when you get there, you can be a guest. You don't need to sign up if it's your first time using Padlet. And you can create a little text and put it in the category you think is appropriate. I'm continuing with the map analogy as well. I just think it's appropriate. So when everyone's managed to get there, I'm going to pull off the live screen. So you can put in multiple ideas.
BC is before COVID?
Before COVID. Do you think that will catch on?
It's a whole new meaning.
Okay, so we can see some things coming online. Probably a little bit behind. I'm going to leave everyone a couple of minutes to think about this. I'm going to take a break so I can cough. Back in a moment. To sue TikTok.
Oh.
Did you get one?
Is that you?
No. Maybe that means use TikTok. I'm sure TikTok have pretty good lawyers.
Robert, can you show the QR code once again?
The
Can you
code?
show the
Sure.
code once again, please?
Okay. Did you get it?
Yes, thanks.
just the code again.
Sure.
I keep exiting it.
Where are you sitting?
Hmm?
Where are you sitting?
I'm not sure.
Maybe losing connection.
No. I think that I just
There's
kept
something.
coming back a couple of times.
Okay, so we do another 30 seconds and then we'll show the results here again. I guess we can keep this Padlet open as well, and maybe it becomes an interesting resource for us as a sample group. Okay, so here we are, some results. Okay, would anyone like to, let's pick one or two, maybe someone could elaborate on. I'm curious on this one, to share even emotional reactions.
It's me.
Okay. Who? Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yes. I became conscious that this online way of teaching developed a new relationship between me and my students, because I got more conscious of their difficulties, and they also taught me that through online they even how can I say, perceived a new dimension of all the teachers, and in particular about me. They saw me more human.
It's almost more intimate, isn't it? Like when you're teaching
Yes,
online,
intimate.
especially if you're at home.
And it was paradoxical.
Yeah.
Because before they saw me, I think more stiff.
Yeah.
And while even if I tried not to use a background, to be professional, they could perceive in my eyes, in my attitude, something more human, and our relationship bettered.
Like that.
Me, I have also to admit that I saw some sufferance, and I understood them better.
That's really articulately expressed, I think, and I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, it's like an equalizer, isn't it? Like you're not the teacher up on a podium anymore, you're the same, and you're all in the same situation.
Yeah, always with respect.
Yeah.
But it was a reciprocal respect.
It's almost like a new level of honesty.
I think I improved my human.
I think a lot of I think a lot of our teachers have done the same thing. The relationship becomes more simple. It's like we're all here, we're in this situation. I'm here to try to teach you, you're here to try to learn, and everything becomes more open almost. Especially when you're in your own home and students are in their own homes, and I've seen some really good examples, and I don't get to teach that often. When I do, I try to encourage students to do it, to use their home when they're at home as well. Like, play games, like go and find the most colourful thing you can in your house and bring it back, and have to run around the house to find something and bring it back. And then you can turn that into a game where they practice the superlative. So things like that, to use their surroundings more, can encourage that kind of honesty, I think, as well. Maybe one more quick, to expand on maybe one more point. Purposely, like breakout rooms are so tricky to use well, and the technology can get in the way instead of helping sometimes. But purposely use breakout rooms. Whose is that point?
Myself.
Can you elaborate a little bit, like especially what you mean by purposely?
Well, when I started teaching, I teach at the university level, and I was shocked actually to learn from my students that they have never been broken up into breakout rooms a year into the pandemic. Mind you, the first course I did with a similar group of students, and then a year later when I was invited to do the same course a year later, I did it entirely different than the first time around, because I learned so much along the way on the technology and teaching online, which by the way, I never thought I could ever do, because I prefer the contact in person. And they told me that they were never broken up into breakout rooms. They basically had a talking head who would at them for an hour and a half, and that was it. And I really looked into engaging the students. And then I thought that for them, it's also an isolating experience, something along the lines of what you just said, Samina, that they also had their hardships. And I thought that one of the purpose of breaking them into smaller groups was for them to have a sense of community again. Even if they were tiny communities and they were in their respective countries, they were international students from all over the world, like from Africa, from Central Asia, from Scandinavia. There was a really a diverse group. So the purpose for this particular exercise was for them to feel more connected to one another. I used the breakout room not only for the advancement of the course material, but also for them to feel their own empowerment in their own learning. So that was that.
Breakout rooms are so interesting. It's something I hope we can look at best practice on as well, because it's such a big part of any kind of online teaching. Like when we started teaching, we're currently having a conversation back at Atlantic about the best pedagogy and the best practice with using breakout rooms. And it's been so important since day one of teaching online. It was critical. Like when we started, we had to choose a platform. So I investigated, like, are we going to teach online? Do we use Teams, because we're already on Outlook, and this would be the most natural, and it's free, which was the big thing as well. But Teams didn't have breakout rooms, so we used. Now they do, but we had to use Zoom, so we used Zoom instead. And once we discovered Teams didn't have the breakouts, it was deal breaker. Like, absolutely not. We need the breakout rooms. The teachers are going to need those, and now that they have them, it doesn't matter. We're with Zoom now. We're going to stay with it, because the teachers have got dominion over it. But the whole idea of breakout, the conversation we're having now is to join or not to join the breakout room. And I've heard arguments on both sides. A teacher who expressed the idea, especially because in a hybrid classroom, it's quite tricky. You need to get a different audio source, so you need to go on your phone or a different computer and go outside the room. It messes with the setup. So I had a teacher who shared the idea you shouldn't join for two reasons. It's simpler with the technology, especially in a hybrid class, but also when you join the breakout room as a teacher, ding dong, the students stop talking and they wait for you to talk. You've joined, you've taken over, it's become a teacher-centered activity. Whatever they were saying, you never know, and you'll never hear it again, it's gone. It is an argument to let it go and relinquish a little bit of control and know that it's happening. I have had the opposite conversation with a teacher very recently who was teaching in a hybrid classroom, and I suggested this to him. Let it go. You don't have to supervise the online students in the breakout. Just let it go. Eavesdrop on the ones in the classroom, and you'll know when the time is right to end the breakout. And you can ask them afterwards, like, no. I have to get in there. I have to listen to what they're saying. So brought his own laptop, brought his own earphones, took the complicated technological steps. Teacher needed to hear what the students were saying in the breakout. So the pedagogy here, what is the best practice? I'm hoping that's something we give some thought to and maybe make some discoveries on. I think it's going to be interesting. So we can sorry.
Isn't it also connected to what the relationship between the teacher and the students is?
Exactly. I think it depends on the students. We know our students best and we know how they feel about that. So if some groups, I do join them. I mean, I did join them because for now we are at school. But with others, I didn't because I knew it would have a negative impact on them.
You would judge it case by case?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would join a group and practical students would be like, Łukasz, go. Just like, go away. We're talking here, you're disturbing, go. And I tried switching off camera and microphone, so sort of like enter quietly, then leave quietly, without just like
Ding dong.
Yeah.
I love that you've cultivated an atmosphere where they will tell you to go. That's
the thing that we have at our school.
Nice. Yeah, it's a good way to be. Hopefully it doesn't go beyond.
No, it doesn't, because it's like a tradition of like 30 years at my school now. So
okay, yeah, that's case by case. I like that. Okay, so we can keep this this brainstorming idea going. I think maybe throughout the day. There's another activity I have as a follow-up to this. I think we can do it later on if we have a little. Interrogum in an activity later on. There's a follow-up activity I'm going to ask you to think about with this as well, with what we've collected here. But this is something we can come back to as a workshop exercise later. For now, presentation. One more kind of piece, and then I think we can take it back. So we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. This is the part I skipped that I just wanted to cover over a little bit. And what I wanted to say here is just following on from the poorly resolved slide from earlier on about the history of pedagogy. And I just wanted to raise some questions about like communicative language teaching and where it's going post-COVID and as technology develops and as we get more comfortable using it. Like, what are the implications? How will the tenets, the core tenets and principles of communicative language teaching adapt? How will they survive with increased digitalization, which we're hoping to stimulate and to push? You know, like with multicultural awareness now, networks are wider. E-twinning is going to be a great example in this project. You know, the chance of having students from 3 different countries or 2 different countries in a breakout room using international English speaking together, there's huge potential for us in that. And the result, it's almost infinite what we can do. Away from PPP, like this is probably happening anyway in terms of pedagogy, like the traditional teacher procedure of present, practice, produce. Like we're changing that and we're flipping that a little bit, and technology probably increases the opportunities to do that, especially when students can do work outside of the classroom, have it done before they come, when there's asynchronous communication between the teacher and the student. And that brings me to flipped learning and the potential for more work to get done outside of the classroom, and also to not spend the time in the classroom on things that don't need to be done in the classroom, and using the teacher time when you're face-to-face or screen-to-screen with students to use that time intelligently and efficiently, and think, we're spending 15 minutes on this, could they have done that earlier? Could I have done this earlier? And flipping learning to that extent. And I can see a path there of things that can develop. Access and infinite resources. And just again to point out the obvious that the internet is unlimited and everything is on Google, and what implications does that have for teaching vocabulary? One thing I would always do from a training perspective is encourage teachers not to explain vocabulary, to let students discover their own vocabulary. There's no point in being a talking dictionary, and especially now more than ever, when they can really quickly jump on an online dictionary and take control of themselves. And I put this quote in, I don't know who was attributed to originally, I liked it. You know, some fear of BYOD and students using their own device, and we had the evasive teacher who maybe bans phones or bans the internet. Why? Because maybe they're going to be distracted from me, or maybe the teacher becomes obsolete, but the teacher who can be replaced by technology probably shouldn't be. It's a truism that I quite like. I talked about this already, but you know, in our case at Atlantic, we're probably not going to go back to photocopies and hard coursebooks. We'll probably stay paper free. I think that's something that COVID has made us do that is probably good practice anyway. And that's quite a big change. The queue for the photocopier is going to be a thing we tell ourselves as a story. Remember when we used to do this crazy thing instead of having a proper break? And they won't believe us, the teachers of the future. Like homework, to use more project-based learning, like can homework be more invigorative now and more challenging? Like go and create a multimedia map of your city, you know, create like an audio to this animation I'm going to show you. There can be much more potential for how these students remember, who are better than us at technology, what they can do for homework. Instead of do exercise C, conjugate the verb in the missing word, you know, the homework can become more interesting. That's a challenge for us as well. Maybe another challenge is, when does a teacher correct homework now, if it needs to be corrected? It's more difficult to do that now. Everybody do something quiet for 10 minutes while I correct yesterday's homework. It's hard to see the future of that as well. Assessment. The only reason I've got this in here is because I wanted to say this sentence out loud. Is proctoring practical? Would anybody like to repeat that quickly? Okay. But you know, it was talked about yesterday, the challenges and how easy it is to cheat when assessment is done online. And the out-of-class communication with the teacher, there's an old adage, have you heard it, the sage on the stage? You probably heard it?
I wanted to go back to the previous one. Sure. And make this kind of comment that when the students want to cheat, I would have a question of, hey, are we doing something wrong with the way we teach? Because otherwise, if you're doing stuff that the kids actually want to do, then there's no reason to cheat.
There's no reason to cheat.
No.
Yeah. If you take away the motivation to cheat, yeah, it's possibly the reason they're cheating in the first place is that their objective is.
That's the design of a course.
Yeah.
If we design it the way that the result is so important, they're gonna cheat, because if the result is more important than the learning, then cheating is a way to get the result. It's as good as learning, it's just another way.
Yeah. So for example, if we go back to the PBL, if the kids would be able to choose a project themselves, what they believe is really impactful and important, because kids are looking for impact. They want to do something useful and meaningful. So if they would be able to work on something that, like, as I said, make a map for visitors. Like if you have a friend coming over to go and, I don't know, have an electronic tour guide. So it could be a lot of fun for some students to do. At the same time, where could you cheat there?
There's no cheating. Yeah.
I mean, there's no possibility. You either do the map, or you say that, hey, but actually I'm not into this and I'm not going to do this.
Yeah, that expresses it really well, I think. Yeah. And the potential for us to set tasks and projects in that way that have their own intrinsic motivation.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's the point as well. I'm glad you mentioned like the student as teacher as well. I think this is a huge part of engagement. If I go back to my own hobby horse of engaging with students, everybody loves speaking about themselves, especially teenagers. In most cases, maybe I shouldn't generalize, but definitely the more extroverted ones. And if there's a way people can present something of themselves, that's such a way to get production going. And the ways to do that with the use of technology, to appeal to the show-off mentality, there's a lot of potential there. Okay. Best of both worlds. Maybe just the. Oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't finish this point. This is an old adage. I've been using it for years. But the sage on the stage, the teacher who holds forth as the teacher center, being replaced with the guide on the side, who hovers and supports. And blended and hybrid, two terms that get interchanged incorrectly and confused quite a lot. Even recently, an Irish government release confused the two things. Blended learning, where you're supporting what you're doing in the classroom with digital resources and using it to make the classroom more effective. To hybrid learning, where you've got students in the classroom and students at home, wherever they may be. And what does that mean? No more sick days. Is that going to be the way things develop? There's possibly less excuse to miss class now as well. You can see that maybe already happening.
Regarding this blended term, I've heard some people starting to use intentionally technology-enhanced learning.
Yeah.
And my kind of gut feeling starts to get this way that, hey, but maybe we should all start using technology-enhanced learning, because this is the goal. I mean, if it's just blended, then maybe it doesn't provide the value actually.
Yeah, so technology is a more descriptive term, but it's also a different concept, no? It's more than just blending, right?
Well, I think the focus area is enhancing, not only blending. So, but it's more like an open question, how everybody feels. Blended is very easy at the same time. Technology enhanced, you need to actually focus.
It's asking more, yeah. I think later on when I share this, I think that I'll include some more on that term, I think, and I think it belongs in this conversation as well. With the defining of the two, recently I got a call from a school director who would be in regular contact, who just wanted to call to ask me a question. The question was, I have some students who can't come to school, how can I reach them? You might be able to recommend a camera I can use. And I realized the question was, how can I set up a hybrid classroom? The school director didn't know that that's what they were asking for, and I explained how complicated it can be if you're going to do it properly. It's like, if you want to do it the simple way, put a camera at the back of the room and you'll get limited results. You can meet your purpose in streaming the classes. But the entirely more complicated thing of hybrid was a different question entirely. But just the familiarity with the term and the whole new thing, they weren't aware yet of this new concept, this new way of doing it. I think I'll just share briefly some results of some surveys we did, and I'll finish up then. This was the survey. Oh yeah. So as part of the application for this project, we did some surveys just to get some preliminary data. It's a start. Like, it's, I would say for like the first output that you guys are going to do in Greece of the research part, maybe it gives you some starting point. But we got some interesting data, but there's more to ask here. And this was just some of it. I put a highlight up here of one of the parts I thought that was quite interesting. You can see that when we asked teenagers the question, and just to give the context, 137 responses. The diversity wasn't so good. There were a lot of Central European students. We didn't get quite as good a mix of profile, but they did fit the age range of like 14, 15, 16. And we got some results that were expected, some that were mildly surprising. The blue being the most popular app was WhatsApp, followed by Instagram closely, and down to like, I remember we included Pinterest, like just thinking like a teacher. They don't know what Pinterest is and they don't care, but teachers love it. So the fact that it was even in there was just falling into the trap of not thinking like and the results show like very few used it. Some, like the majority, we never had used it. Compare that to quite a lot not using Facebook as well. 62% was probably higher than expected. Watch movies or TV with a specific goal of learning English. I think we asked them if they watch Netflix in English, and that many said they did. And they picked, that was one of the ways in which they learn English outside of the classroom. The screen time question was probably confirmed what I would have expected, that more than half of the students had 3 or more hours of screen time. And this was, the results of this were February 2020, so almost exclusively pre-pandemic, just before the pandemic. So it would be interesting to maybe ask that question again and do a comparative.
Like 8 plus.
Yeah.
Is this per app or what is it called? Just total day. Yeah. Daily.
The statistic? It's per day. Yeah.
We did a survey at our school at some point 3 months ago. The average screen time for our students was more than 10 hours.
Yeah, it's like
on the phone.
8 to something.
Yes, 4 or 5 hours YouTube only. Yeah, the record was 17.
17? Yeah.
So this person, spent their day on the phone and then slept for a few hours, and that's it. That's 24 hours, right?
Because it's becoming
17.
work. It's work, rest, and play. It's all three.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the question of using technology is quite difficult one. One of the Polish experts, Professor Pyrzalski, has a nice comment about it. If if you're using the navigation with your earphones in, not looking at the screen, are you using your mobile? Should you count it or not?
Oh, true, yeah. It's not technically.
So it's like you should be like very specific. I like it how you specify its screen time, because like that's actually like looking at the screen. But for example, I use my phone all the time, even if I'm sleeping. It's like doing something in the background. So like, am I using it or not? It's doing something for me. It's gonna wake me up in the morning. It's waking with the alarm clock. But
yeah, I'm the same. I don't wear a watch. I check the time on my phone. So it's
if I wake up, I'm gonna check the time, check the messages.
Having said that, if I was asking the question again, I'd probably be even more specific. You know, really kind of express what I mean, and maybe get a differential between a screen of a PC and the phone, and maybe probably get some more data that way. But it would be interesting to go back on that question again now, with a little bit more specificity. That was an interesting statistic, I thought. Like these last two, again pre-pandemic, hardly ever go online during the class, so almost half. And that was the way the question was phrased: go online. Is it hardly ever during class, and only 9% went online very often in class. Okay, so
was it in Central Europe? You said.
A lot of the students who did that were Austrian, because they were the students I had access to at the time. So probably too many of them were Austrian to get the diversity we wanted. I think probably from rural schools actually as well. So that's why I do qualify the data. There were some good few Italian students.
We should do something similar in Greece.
Well, that's what
you're going to.
Excellent. But I'm looking forward to
I will need those results to compare. Just compare.
I'll give you these now, but I'm really interested because you're going to be able to go much deeper.
It's good to see like a relation between apps and their grades, maybe.
And the grades?
Yeah.
Only if you know you can do something.
Yeah, I wouldn't have the data out here now, it'd be too late for that, but it would be good to get that, yeah. If we would have to de-anonymize it.
Yeah.
But that should be part of our pilot course as well. Okay, so lastly then, just to, this is less meaningful, we didn't get too much feedback on it, but we did do a teacher survey as well. I think we can do it now, or do it maybe after the break, so I'll leave it your opinion. We didn't get much feedback on this, so I do qualify the data a little bit. So I'll leave that there. It was the same purpose of providing data to make the case for the InLife project. But we didn't get so many recipients, there were only like 20 or so. So that needs more data. I'll leave it, some of the stats there and QR code there, so perhaps during the break or afterwards we can
this will be something to do in the second part of our workshop when we talk about where are we as teachers.
Okay, so that's me. Thanks everyone for the attention. Sorry for talking so long.
Should we stop the live stream now?
Yes.
We're not going to need it anymore.
No.
Okay, great. I just have to call.
Have I used up all the data?
It's just you talking.
So if this is just a break and the live stream should continue. No. Okay. This is the end. Okay, just give me a moment.
Okay, so
thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have half an hour break.
Yes.
But I would ask you to go downstairs so we can take a group picture before
Oh, yes.
the persons will leave, okay? So let's go downstairs and then you